For decades, Matthew McConaughey was the epitome of Hollywood charm, a southern gentleman with a killer smile, effortless charisma, and a career that seemed to age like fine wine. From rom-com heartthrob to Oscar-winning powerhouse, McConaughey had it all: the fame, the family, the fortune. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding, one far darker than fans ever imagined. Now, at 55, the beloved actor is finally revealing the cracks that have long been hidden beneath his confident exterior. The truth? It's not about lost roles or failed projects. It's about internal battles, devastating losses, and a lifetime of trying to outrun ghosts that never quite stopped haunting him. From the trauma of his chaotic childhood to the emotional toll of fame, Matthew's journey has been paved with secrets and scars. This is not just the story of an actor. This is the unraveling of a man once worshipped by Hollywood, now seeking something far more elusive than stardom: peace. The tragedy of Matthew McConaughey isn't what he lost. It's what he's still searching for, and what he's finally ready to admit may break your heart. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about the man behind the legend. Matthew McConaughey's story doesn't begin on the red carpets of Hollywood, nor under the bright lights of a movie set. It begins in Uvalde, Texas, a small town where the heat was relentless, the streets quiet, and family life far from perfect. Born in 1969 to James and Kay McConaughey, Matthew was the youngest of 3 siblings, growing up in a household marked by contradictions: love and chaos, laughter and tension, stability and sudden upheaval. His father, a former newspaper reporter and accountant, could be both charismatic and controlling, a man whose own struggles cast long shadows over the family. Matthew's mother, meanwhile, was gentle but often overwhelmed, trying to hold the family together while grappling with her own disappointments. For a young boy with big dreams, this home was both sanctuary and battlefield, shaping a resilience that would later become his signature, but at a cost few could see. From an early age, Matthew learned that life was unpredictable. He was a bright, energetic child, eager to please and desperate to belong, yet he carried an undercurrent of fear, a sense that the world could turn cruel at any moment. School offered little escape. While talented and ambitious, he often felt like an outsider, navigating a social world that didn't always understand him. He found solace in acting and sports, disciplines that allowed him to channel the storm inside into something productive, something that could be controlled. But even here, victory was fleeting, and the pressure relentless. Every small triumph was overshadowed by the awareness that life could be brutally unfair, a lesson that would echo through his adult years. The tragedies of his childhood were subtle, but deep. Family tensions simmered. Arguments would erupt into silence that lingered for days. Matthew witnessed the fragility of love firsthand, learning that relationships, even those with people you depend on most, could be fragile and unforgiving. These early experiences carved emotional scars that, for decades, remained hidden beneath his easygoing, charismatic exterior. Friends and colleagues would later remark that McConaughey always carried an intensity behind his smile, a depth that was impossible to ignore once you got close. It was this intensity, born in the crucible of a challenging upbringing, that would fuel both his drive for success and the private struggles that would later define him. By the time he left Texas for college at the University of Texas at Austin, Matthew was already wrestling with questions that fame and fortune could never answer. Who am I beneath the public persona? How do I reconcile the love I crave with the fear of loss I've always carried? These questions, whispered in quiet moments alone, would follow him to Hollywood, shaping his choices in ways both profound and heartbreaking. The boy from Uvalde had learned the first lesson of life. Happiness is fleeting, and peace is earned, often at great personal cost. Matthew McConaughey's journey from the dusty streets of Uvalde to the glimmering world of Hollywood seemed like a dream realized. But for him, it was a dream laced with unexpected burdens. After moving to Los Angeles, his charm and talent quickly caught the attention of casting directors. His breakthrough came in the 1990s with romantic comedies like Dazed and Confused, A Time to Kill, and later, The Wedding Planner, solidifying him as Hollywood's affable leading man. Audiences adored him, critics praised him, and yet, behind the accolades, McConaughey began to feel the weight of a different kind of spotlight, one that shone not on his craft, but on his life, his persona, and every choice he made. Fame was intoxicating, but it was also relentless, and it left little room for privacy or genuine connection. Hollywood demanded perfection, and McConaughey delivered, yet each triumph came with invisible costs. The pressure to maintain a flawless public image clashed with his deeply introspective nature. Parties, premieres, and interviews became performances, masks he had to wear, even when exhaustion and doubt gnawed at him. While fans saw confidence, charm, and an effortless cool, Matthew wrestled with anxiety and a gnawing sense of isolation. The world knew the actor. Few knew the man who lay awake at night, questioning his choices and wondering if all the success could ever fill the emptiness he felt. As the years passed, the roles that once defined him began to feel confining. The rom-com era, though lucrative, left him yearning for deeper, more meaningful work. The pursuit of critical acclaim brought its own set of struggles. Transformative roles like in Dallas Buyers Club and Interstellar required not just physical preparation, but a complete emotional excavation, confronting pain, loss, and fear in ways that left lingering marks. McConaughey's obsession with authenticity in his craft often mirrored his personal life, intense, consuming, and sometimes isolating. Colleagues would later recall long hours on set where he immersed himself completely, disappearing into the character to the point where it was hard to tell where Matthew ended and the role began. Amid this, his personal life was far from sheltered. Relationships, though passionate, were often turbulent, strained by a career that demanded so much of him. Romantic highs and heartbreaks interwove with the dizzying pace of stardom, creating an emotional pendulum that swung between euphoria and despair. Even marriage, often seen as a stabilizing force, became another arena for struggle as Matthew worked tirelessly to balance his love for his family with the relentless demands of his profession. Ultimately, McConaughey's rise to fame was a double-edged sword. The Hollywood he conquered offered wealth, influence, and recognition, but it also exposed vulnerabilities that few outsiders could comprehend. At 55, the price of stardom is clearer than ever, a life where applause is constant, but peace remains elusive, where public triumph masks private battles, and where the boy from Uvalde, once dreaming of escape, now understands that some scars follow you no matter how bright the spotlight shines. Even as Matthew McConaughey's star rose to its zenith, the man behind the charm was no stranger to loss. Loss that was private, profound, and unrelenting. Fame could shield him from the ordinary struggles of life, but it could not spare him from heartbreak that reached into the very core of his being. One of the earliest and most enduring tragedies came from within his own family. Though he often speaks fondly of his parents, the relationship was far from simple. His father, James, was a figure of both admiration and tension, a man whose ambitions sometimes overshadowed tenderness, whose battles with his own demons left echoes that Matthew could never fully escape. When James passed away, the grief was layered with unresolved questions, a mixture of love, regret, and an aching sense of incompletion that haunted Matthew for years. Romantic relationships, too, were a crucible of emotional turmoil. Before his eventual marriage to Camilla Alves, McConaughey endured heartbreak that often seemed magnified under the unforgiving eye of the public. Each relationship, each failed romance, added another layer to the complex mosaic of pain he carried, a reminder that, despite fame, he was vulnerable like any other human being. Even successes in love were tinged with anxiety and doubt, a fear that happiness was fleeting, that life could snatch it away in an instant. These fears were compounded by the isolation inherent to Hollywood life, long periods on set, public scrutiny, and a career that demanded constant reinvention left little room for emotional rest or reconciliation. The tragedies of the wider world also left their mark. Friends lost, colleagues fallen from grace, and the sudden, often violent ways in which life could change became stark reminders of mortality. McConaughey, known for his philosophical musings, often reflects on these events with a mixture of sadness and a deep existential awareness. He understands that his celebrity cannot insulate him from life's cruelest realities. while the cameras capture a confident smile or a poised award acceptance. The private Matthew contends with grief that is raw and unfiltered, a grief that has taught him both humility and resilience in ways no movie role ever could. Parenthood, while a source of joy, has not been without its pressures. McConaughey has spoken candidly about the weight of responsibility he feels for his children, a burden that merges love with fear, the fear of failing them, the fear of repeating patterns from his own childhood, the fear of losing them to a world he knows can be harsh and unforgiving. Balancing the roles of father, husband, and public figure is a challenge that few can fully comprehend, yet he navigates it with a sincerity that is rarely visible on the screen. Every decision is filtered through the lens of protecting the ones he loves, even when it means sacrificing aspects of his own desires or comfort. At 55, McConaughey's story is not simply one of Hollywood triumph, but of human endurance. His personal losses, the deaths, the heartbreaks, the quiet moments of despair, have shaped him as profoundly as his career achievements. They reveal a man who has faced the depths of sorrow and continues to search for meaning, for peace, and for a love that is steady and unshakable. The tragedy of Matthew McConaughey, perhaps more than anything, lies not in what he has gained, but in the profound depth of what he has endured. Now, at 55, Matthew McConaughey stands at a crossroads between the life he has built and the truths he can no longer ignore. The boy from Uvalde, the heartthrob of rom-coms, the Oscar-winning actor, he is all of these, yet none fully capture the man beneath the carefully cultivated public image. In recent years, Matthew has spoken more openly about the emotional toll of a life lived in the spotlight, the invisible scars carried from childhood, and the private grief that fame could never erase. What once seemed like charm and charisma was often a carefully maintained armor, shielding a man who, despite his success, still wrestles with loneliness, fear, and the haunting echoes of loss. The tragedy he faces now is subtle but profound. It is the ongoing struggle to reconcile identity with expectation, the tension between who he is, who the world sees, and who he hopes to become. Every role he chooses, every public appearance, every interview is weighed against this internal calculus, a negotiation between the demands of Hollywood and the quiet voice of self-preservation. His passion for acting remains, yet it is no longer merely about fame or accolades. It is about authenticity, about using his craft to navigate a world that has been both generous and cruel. Friends close to him describe a man more introspective than ever, one who carefully chooses his words, his roles, and the moments he shares publicly, all while privately grappling with questions that cannot be answered by awards or applause. Family continues to anchor him, but even here the complexities of life weigh heavily. Matthew's role as a father and husband has forced him to confront patterns from his past, to break cycles of pain and misunderstanding, and to prioritize emotional honesty over convenience. The joy of parenthood, though immense, is intertwined with a persistent anxiety, a fear that even his best efforts may fall short, that the burdens of life's unpredictability could still inflict damage he cannot control. This ongoing tension is part of what makes his story heartbreaking. The man who appears so invincible on screen is, in private, profoundly human, navigating the vulnerabilities that come with love, responsibility, and legacy. Even the philosophical side of McConaughey, the one that delights in meditative musings and reflections on purpose, reveals a kind of quiet despair. He speaks openly about the fleeting nature of happiness, the importance of presence, and the inevitability of change. But there is an unmistakable undercurrent of melancholy, a recognition that life has demanded more of him than the casual observer could ever imagine. At 55, he is both a survivor and a man still seeking something essential: peace, understanding, and the reconciliation of a life lived at full intensity with the quiet yearning for serenity. Ultimately, the tragedy of Matthew McConaughey is not the absence of success, love, or admiration. It is the weight of living fully, deeply, and with awareness of life's fragility. It is the heartbreak of a man who has achieved everything the world could offer, yet continues to carry the burdens of his past, the losses of his life, and the private truths that fame can never hide. And it is in this tension, the intersection of triumph and sorrow, charisma and vulnerability, that the true story of Matthew McConaughey emerges. A life that is as inspiring as it is heartbreaking. A journey that reminds us that even legends are not immune to tragedy.